This is Vivian.
Good evening and welcome to the second in a series of virtual discussions brought to you by Immigrant Community Services in partnership with the Barry Law Firm, African Communities Together, and Afrique Today, an online streaming platform where we bring you critical resources and information as the world deals with the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Shingi Mangwiro and I'm honored to be your host and moderator this evening. I want to warmly welcome our viewers and our special guests this evening. For our new viewers, let me tell you a little bit about Immigrant Community Services and what we do. Immigrant Community Services is a nonprofit organization serving the African immigrant communities in the Washington, D.C. metro area. ICS offers a broad range of social, family, employment, education, and culture programs to the African and other immigrant communities in Montgomery County and surrounding areas. Our discussion today is part of an ongoing series bringing in subject matter experts from our community to talk about critical issues and share helpful resources. Today, we're glad to welcome our immigration subject matter experts. I'll start with Fatmata Barry. She's an attorney at law and CEO of the Barry Law Firm. Fatmata has over 20 years experience as a community advocate and organizer with a focus on civic engagement and coalition building. She successfully litigated many special education cases representing students with special needs. She's passionate and committed to fair representation in law, electoral process, and social and economic justice, with experience in drafting policy and running campaigns. She's a former Montgomery County State Delegate candidate who succeeded in galvanizing underrepresented communities to be civically engaged and exceed their voter turnout. Second, we welcome Hewitt Berhan, the legal director at African Communities Together, ACT, a nonprofit organization serving African immigrants across the United States. She's worked for Booz Allen Hamilton for 5 years and went on to earn her Juris Doctor from Washington University of Law. Hewitt practiced immigration law, serving individuals and businesses in private practice for several years before joining ACT. She's a member of the Maryland Bar Association and the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Last but certainly not least, one gentleman on the panel, Amaha Kassa is ACT's founder and executive director. Amaha has 25 years of professional experience as a labor and community organizer, nonprofit director, and social entrepreneur. For 9 years, Amaha directed East Bay Alliance for Sustainable Economic Workers rights nonprofit in Oakland, California, growing it from a startup to one of the leading organizations in its field. Prior to launching ACT, Amaha earned his law degree from the University of California, Berkeley, and a master's in public policy from Harvard University. Wow. I'm super impressed with our panelists this evening. We certainly have a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure our viewers would benefit a lot from the panel discussion, and it is indeed a very important conversation. And our topic for tonight is the effect of the COVID-19 on U.S. immigration processes and enforcement. With this unprecedented pandemic and with which we know has no borders, we see with stronger lens the intersection of U.S. immigration and public health policies. Most importantly, we see the unique challenges that our community of immigrants face in the United States today. Today, we're seeing some of the toughest immigration restrictions in the United States in modern times, and that has been put in place by the current administration. These fears of immigration enforcement, uncertainty of what the suspension of immigration process, compounded by the anxiety triggered by the pandemic, is enormous. So let's get right to it, and I'm sure our viewers are eager to hear from you. I'll start with Ms. Barry. How are you, Fatmata?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. It's good to have you on the panel.
It's such an honor.
I know. It's always good to have you on the program. So my first question to you is, how are the pending applications affected by all the closures going on with immigration offices? And will people still be able to file their own petitions and ones for their loved ones?
Well, the closures were mainly for protection. They were closing down the one-on-one application appointments, like interviews and so on. However, people are still able to file for their immigration benefits, and those applications are still being worked on by CIS. So at the end of the day, people should still file if they have a path to an immigration benefit. It's just that they've limited in-person immigration appointments, including biometrics and things of that nature. But basically, you can still file.
Okay, so I'll move to Hewitt, and then I'll come back because I have some follow-up questions regarding that, what public benefits are and what the in-person services are that have been canceled besides the biometrics. Ms. Hewitt, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So we've heard a lot about public benefits impact on immigration. What should people know about receiving those benefits, including unemployment during COVID-19? And, having the public order, will future applications for green card and or citizenship be affected by applying or receiving social services?
Okay, great question. So because of, due to COVID-19, a lot of our community members have lost their jobs, folks that are working in the service industry, self-employed, as well as Uber drivers and hair braiders. So we've been hearing that folks are afraid to apply for unemployment benefits, thinking that it would be part of a public charge. So a public charge is what was enacted in mid-February, where a person who would want to adjust in the United States would not be likely be a burden or be to the government. So those public benefits that are under the public charge include Medicaid, housing, as well as food stamp. Unemployment benefit is not a public charge. So I encourage folks to apply for it and not to worry about it, and to live towards their livelihood. In addition, during COVID-19, there are a couple of laws and encouragements that are being legislated, including the CARES Act. So there's this, as part of the CARES Act, there was a stimulus check and then loans for small government as organizations from the government. So those type of things are also not part of the public charge. So Medicaid is a public charge. However, USCIS explicitly has stated that using Medicaid for COVID-19 reasons would not count as part of the public charge. So if you're using Medicaid for testing, treatment. In the instance there's a vaccine, if you're going to be using that, it would not be counted as a public charge when you adjust. In addition, I just want to remind folks that only people who are adjusting to get their green card are impacted by the public charge, not those who are citizens and those people who already have a green card.
Okay. So people who have a green card and applying for citizenship don't fall under the public charge, is what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Our next question. Would be for Hewitt. I'm sorry, for Omaha. So some of our community members were left out of COVID relief. What efforts are being made to ensure benefits for those excluded?
I'm sorry, I may have lost the video. Can you hear me?
Okay, looks like Omaha, we had lost him. Can you hear me, Omaha?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfect. Okay, so I was asking that some of our community members were left out of COVID relief. What efforts are being made to ensure that benefits for excluded workers through federal legislation?
Well, that's a great question. So as Hewitt mentioned, the CARES Act was this $2 trillion bill by the federal government, and it included 3 or 4 categories of assistance for American workers and business owners who were economically impacted by the epidemic. So among those were expanding unemployment, saying that unemployment will be made available even to sort of freelance workers or gig workers, including a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers. So that was, and then extending how long the benefits were and increasing the amount of the benefits for an additional $600 per week, which is a pretty significant boost to unemployment benefits. So that was one big category of assistance. Another was the help to small businesses. You might have heard about this Paycheck Protection Act, which would enable small businesses to continue to pay their workers for 2.5 months, and with the government providing a loan that could then be forgiven if they maintain payroll. Another big benefit was, of course, the stimulus that we've referred to, which is this rebate of $1,200 for a single filer that people are, some people I know right now are looking for in the mail or in their bank account. So eligibility for these benefits varies across our community members. If people are work authorized but may not have a green card, but so for example, somebody who was applying for asylum and received a work authorization after 6 months, and was working on that temporary work authorization. Other people, like temporary protected status holders, we have a lot of these in our African communities. They may be eligible for certain of these benefits because unemployment really doesn't look at your immigration status per se, it looks at your work authorization. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a green card. But if people don't have any work authorization, they are likely excluded from unemployment. Mm-hmm. Similarly, with the stimulus, many people in our communities who have permanent or temporary status have a Social Security number. If they filed their tax return with a Social Security number, and everyone on their tax return had a Social Security number, then they should qualify for a stimulus rebate as long as they don't exceed the maximum income. However, if they use what's called an individual taxpayer ID number or an ITIN, which many undocumented people use to pay taxes as is required under the law, then unfortunately the U.S. government cut them out of the stimulus rebate program. Not only those who filed with an I-10, but those who had any member of their family file with an I-10. Now, small business, again, people don't necessarily have to have immigration status, either permanent or temporary, in order to apply for some of these forms of small business assistance. It really comes down to the business and the authorization of the business rather than the individual. So we think that that cutting I-10 holders out of the stimulus rebate was unnecessary and harmful. We are advocating at the federal level that future deals, future relief packages. We've already passed stimulus round 4 in this most recent week, and we're expecting, but we know that there's likely to be a round 5 and beyond. We believe that those should be extended to I-10 holders. We also think that certain states need to step into the gap and provide relief to undocumented community members who were excluded by the federal relief package, but who are paying taxes, who are supporting families, and who often are on the front lines of responding to COVID-19.
All right, Amaha, thank you so much for going deep and fully explaining to everyone. And one thing that I just want to emphasize from that is you mentioned that unemployment is not based off of your immigration status. A lot of people don't know that. So they're afraid to file. It's based on your employment, you said, on your
work authorization. So
yeah,
generally you have to have some immigration status in order to have work authorization. But it could be a temporary work authorization, such as TPS or waiting for your asylum case.
For your asylum case. Thank you. And I'll go back to Fatmata. How does this COVID pandemic and shutdown affect people who are detained and their cases, their immigration cases, and those who are in asylum proceedings? And are they able to file later after the year due to COVID? Are there remote support structures in place? What measures are being put in place to mitigate some of these issues? Hi, Fatmata.
Can you hear me?
I think you were on mute. Did you hear my question? Yes,
yeah?
I can hear you.
Okay. Is that better?
Much better. I can see you too.
Okay, so as far as we know right now, there have not really been any changes as far as detained immigrants are concerned. Amaha can probably chime in a little bit because they do a lot of activism, community activism, and policy work. But as far as we know, none of that has changed as of yet. People are still detained. A lot of the hearings that are being canceled are usually non-detained hearings. So many of the detained hearings are sort of still going on. That's one. And as far as people seeking asylum, as far as we know, they're not making it easier for people. They're not extending the timeline. You still have to file within the year unless something has changed. And additionally, as far as we're aware, it's gotten even worse for those who are at the border trying to come in. So we have many Africans who go through the Mexican border, and people don't talk about that much. But we have Africans who go through the Mexican border to come into the U.S. to seek asylum. And the policy of this administration is basically that if you're not from Mexico, they will stop you and they will send you back to, I guess, wait out things over there in whatever city. So the way it works right now, unfortunately for asylum seekers, they have not made it easier. And so to some degree, people who are being detained at the border, they're in real squalor. I mean, it's really bad and it's not healthy. And with this COVID-19 issue, they are at really major risks. And I know a lot of times we when we talk about the Mexican border as it's just South Americans and whatnot, but there's a large number of people who are coming in from the African continent to come into this country. And as for remote resources, of course, the attorneys like myself who, we're working remotely. And then you have organizations like ACT, who I'm sure will, still taking calls and emails to assist people and sort of help out. So yes, there are resources out there, including people like myself who are attorneys, and we do work remotely, and we do provide services. People can call and email, and we can still provide them with the services without having to have an open space for everyone right now.
Okay. All right. And we'll get your contact information later for our viewers. And for those just joining us, we're having our conversation on the effect of COVID-19 on the U.S. immigration processes. And we have Fatbata, Amaha, and Hewitt as our panelists. I'll go back to Hewitt. We've heard immigration enforcement is continuing even during the lockdown. If somebody encounters ICE or other immigration enforcement officers, what should they do?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so they were continuing the lockdown at the beginning of the pandemic, and then there was some advocacy around it to lessen it and to tell them, kind of like back up and not enforce it. So they updated their website. So right now, their policy, just to give you an update, is their policy is that they're only enforcing for those who are a risk to the public or who have a criminal background. And they're not reaching to hospitals and healthcare places. However, given that, we can't be 100% sure of that. So I'll just go through two scenarios where what would you do if ICE comes to your house, or if you're out either getting some fresh air or in a grocery store, what you should do if you encounter ICE then. So, if ICE comes and knocks on your door, make sure that you ask for a warrant. So a warrant is a document that indicates your name, your address, and a signature from a judge. So that document can be slipped in under the door or identified through the window. It's important that you do not consent to opening the door or let the officers in without receiving that document. And so sometimes an officer may offer you that document, and it may have been from ICE, which is Immigration, Customs and Enforcement warrant. That is an arrest warrant. That is not a warrant from a judge to search your premises. So it's important that we have to distinguish that. You don't have to open the door for them in those instances. However, if it is a search warrant identifying your house and signed by a judge, you should open the door for them to come in and search. And then, of course, once you encounter that, make sure you remain silent and don't give information because any information that you provide at that time will be used against you. And then the second instance is if you encounter ICE at a public space, such as outside or in a grocery store. So when they come in, if they ask, I would recommend that you just remain silent. They would ask for an identification, and that identification you should only provide if you're in a state where an ID form is required. It depends whether an ID is required depending on which state you're in. And don't consent to a search. They'll ask you if we can search you. Don't do that. Don't provide information. Don't run. Don't get agitated because that gives them a reason for them to search you or to do what they want from you. And don't provide false documents at that time. And then lastly, just ask if you're free to leave, and then just politely walk away in those instances. It's important that we understand, especially now that we're home, that we don't give permission ICE to come into our home without the proper documentation.
All right, thank you so much. And for our viewers, you can check out our Facebook and Twitter pages at IMMISERVE, IMMISERVE, and you can actually submit questions so our panelists are able to respond to your questions. And again, if you're joining us, we're discussing the effect of COVID-19 on the U.S. immigration process and enforcement. And I'll take it back to you, Amaha. Before COVID-19, President Trump issued an order banning immigration visas for most for mostly African countries, Nigeria and Eritrea, Tanzania, Sudan. They're ineligible to apply even for the DV lottery. Is this still in effect, and how does it impact other Africans or Africans in general?
Yes, it seems like a lifetime ago because so much has happened since then. But yes, the so-called African ban was a really significant executive order affecting thousands of our community members. Since we're on the topic of executive orders, I do have to mention that since we've been on the air, I've gotten notice that that President Trump has signed the executive order that he said he would sign, supposedly putting a stop to immigration to the U.S. So I should probably speak briefly to that, what we know so far, since it was signed about 15 minutes ago, it looks like. So let me start with that since it's fresh on our minds, and then I'll talk about the Africa ban. So this latest executive order, which is very much a product of the post-COVID anxiety and concern, it effectively stops employment-based immigration. So for the most part, it does not affect people who are lawful permanent residents or U.S. citizens, and it doesn't touch, as far as we can tell, family-based migration. So the ability of people to bring spouses, children, and those kinds of things. There are other problems, as Fatmata and Hewitt and other lawyers who have, or are advocating for to bringing family members can testify. A lot of that immigration has already ground to a halt in terms of consular processing. But this executive order should not make significant changes to that. It's largely going to affect employment-based migration. They are, of course, carving out a very large exception for healthcare workers, even as they are announcing that they're putting a halt to employment-based migration. They're saying, well, that doesn't apply to doctors and nurses and healthcare workers. In fact, contact us for expedited processing of your visa so that you can go fight COVID on the front lines as a healthcare worker. So we need to keep a close eye on that. But actually, for the most part, most African immigrants don't come into the country on employment-based visa. It's rare in our community. It happens, of course, but it's not the most common category. So what does the African ban do? Well, it targets 4 different African countries, but it targets them in different ways. The heaviest effects fall on 2 countries, Nigeria and Eritrea. And Nigeria is not only the largest country on the African continent, but it's also the largest part of the Nigerian immigrant or the African immigrant diaspora in the United States. The African ban, this previous executive order, puts a halt essentially to family-based migration for Nigerian immigrants. It does the same thing for immigrants from Eritrea. And there's been a significant migration from Eritrea in recent years. So this is going to have a really major impact on Nigeria and Eritrea. For Sudan and Tanzania, the effect is not quite as great. What the executive order does is ban Tanzanians and ban Sudanese from applying to the diversity visa lottery, sometimes called the green card lottery. Under this executive order, Sudanese and Tanzanians are no longer eligible to apply to that program. This is on top of other restrictions that the administration put in place, saying that you're no longer eligible to apply to the green card lottery unless you have a passport from your country of origin. And that actually is a change that caused our organization, African Communities Together, to organize a lawsuit against the Trump administration We felt that they made this change without regard to the proper process for changing laws, for changing federal laws. And so that lawsuit is pending. It's working its way through the DC district courts. We anticipate that we will also be filing suit against the African ban. The COVID-19 epidemic and the shutdown has slowed the timeline for some of these things. But we think that singling out these countries, supposedly on the basis of their not being secure, without providing real evidence that that Nigeria or Eritrea or Sudan or Tanzania presented any greater risk than other countries, and without using much more, reasonable means to address any potential security issues, demonstrates that the real concern here was never security. It was about demographic supremacy. It was about keeping immigration in the U.S. limited to certain countries and to certain groups. And that is not a legitimate purpose under the U.S. Constitution. So we are going to challenge the African ban.
Okay, thank you so much. And Ahmad just mentioned that, the recent executive order, he touched on employment visas and how is it affecting green card application, not the green card lottery, but the green card applications themselves, and how is it likely to affect people?
So from what we know, as of right now, it's not going to impact people who are applying green card in the United States or people who have green card that are trying to come back into the United States or non-immigrant visas. So tourist visas and those things, I don't think it's going to impact it from what we know as of right now.
Okay, also the ban is not banning tourist visas, just employment.
No,
okay.
No tourist visas. And then, just to give you a perspective on the immigrant visa, like Amaha said, the Department of State, which is the department that issues visas and that has embassies and consulates, had suspended routine visas since as of March 2020. So they are not processing any type of visas. They're not conducting interviews. So this was not happening anyways.
Okay. All right. And again, I know we probably have questions right now. I'll just ask Fatmata one question before we see what questions our viewers have. So in light of what Amaha and you would have explained to us, how hard is it to file extensions during the pandemic? And what happens to current appointments, including biometric citizenship and other interviews? What should people with green card applications, pending citizen applications, or pending green card renewals do at this time? Or even pending work permits, what should they do?
Well, continue with the process. Because as I said earlier, the USCIS is not closed. In-person services are. So the biometrics part, people who have applied for, say, their work permits and things like that, they will use what they already have. So if you're renewing your green card or you're renewing your work permit, they will use what they already have for you. As for people who are doing extensions, so they made a little bit of adjustment guidelines as far as extensions are concerned. So that's like for people who are here visiting. So if part of your problem or a major part of your problem is that you might need to overstay your entrance, not your visa per se, your stay itself, then they're giving you more time to file your extension. They're giving you more time to respond to what they call our request for evidence and things like that, and more time to respond to when they give you a notice of intent to deny. So those kind of things they've extended some time to give you more time to do, but you can talk to an attorney to get a better idea. It's always better. So you can hear us, and we go through these things so fast. But it's not specific to any particular case. So it's better to really have a one-on-one conversation with an attorney to really understand where your case stands. So for those who are filing for the green cards, it's not stopping. The process is not stopping. It's still going on. They're still reviewing applications, and they're still making decisions on applications that people are filing. So that hasn't ended. It's just a one-on-one.
Okay. And go ahead. Sorry.
What that means is people who have applied for citizenship, they're sort of in a limbo now. So, no swearing in. None of those things are happening right now. So, which is sort of one of the most unfortunate parts of this whole non-person-to-person situation that's happening. So that's one major thing as far as the people who are filing for citizenship and those who already have them pending.
Mm-hmm. And regarding biometrics, I think I read somewhere that they are probably using your existing biometrics file. Is that correct? That since you cannot go in physically for fingerprinting, they'll just use what they have already?
Correct. That's what they say they'd be doing.
Okay. All right. And looks like I have a question. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I'm cynical because so that's what they say they're doing.
Yeah.
But I always proffer with, they say they're doing that. So we'll just see what they do, because unfortunately we haven't had a very good experience with this administration when it comes to immigration. So.
Yeah, looks like we have our viewers sending in their questions. The first one, and this is open to any one of you panelists. The first question is, my parents just got approved for a green card based on family, and they're still overseas. They have come to the U.S. they have to come to the U.S. within a certain time. What will happen if they cannot make it within the time they're supposed to come in due to COVID-19? If any one of you can answer.
I can answer it. This is Hewitt. So I'm hoping that they would be flexible because they've been flexible in terms of like USCIS, like Fatmata said, that they've extended things that were due during the COVID timeline. So for instance, like USCIS, if there's a request for evidence or a notice that was sent between March 1st and May 1st of 2020, they've given us 60 days. And then the overstay, they were able to say an extension. At this time, I didn't see any particular guidance at the embassy and the consulate's sites pertaining to that those situations, and I'm sure there are quite a few folks that are in that situation. I just think we could wait for guidance, and hopefully they'll be a little bit more flexible since it's a circumstance that's beyond our control.
And Hewitt, I think you've just answered our next question. And if you haven't, maybe you can elaborate. This viewer is asking, will requests for information that were due before the shutdown get a time extension? I think that's.
Yeah. I mean, so the guidance on the USCIS website is like super particular in saying that if it is due between March 1st and May 1st of 2020, then you get a 60-day extension. So that those dates, if it was due or if the notice was during that time, you can get a 60-day extension. But if it was due, for instance, in February, or if the notice was due if the notice was in February, I would be careful. It's just, I still send it in, and I'm not advising people to go and risk and go to the post office to risk and gather evidence. But I just, I take precautions with this administration. Like Fatma said, it's really, really hard. So I just send it in within the timeline. But if it's impossible, then you have that 60-day extension if your notices were between that time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we have another question here. So under public charge, would SNAP program, and maybe you can explain to our viewers who may not be familiar with these programs, The question is, under the public charge, would SNAP program, TCA, and other social services utilized at this time impact the green card application? And I believe Amaha had talked about that.
But I could speak to that a little bit, although I know SNAP, I don't know TCA. I mean, what I'll say is to repeat some of what Hiwot described. So COVID-19 has not eliminated this expanded public charge rule that went into effect recently. So the public charge rule still exists, and certain kinds of benefits like SNAP, which is also known as food stamps, formerly known as WIC. This is food coupons to enable low-income families to meet their nutritional needs. Medicaid and housing, these expanded categories still exist and still may contribute to a finding that somebody is a public charge and therefore ineligible to adjust their status and become a permanent resident. It's important to keep a couple things in mind, however. One is that not everybody is subject to the public charge rule. It has no bearing whatsoever on citizenship for people who are permanent residents and seeking to become citizens. And it doesn't apply to every means of applying for permanent residence. Humanitarian programs like asylum, it doesn't affect eligibility. Public charge determination doesn't affect eligibility there. Victims of crime, victims of crime or trafficking or domestic violence, it doesn't affect their eligibility to become permanent residents. And then, as Hiwot said, there are also certain carve-outs from public charge in relation to COVID-19. Things that either never would have triggered a public charge determination or don't trigger a public charge determination under the current circumstances. So that includes unemployment. Unemployment is actually called unemployment insurance. It's a form of earned benefit. When you work, you pay into unemployment insurance, and so does your employer, and then you get that back when you're unable to work. That, it is very clear, will not trigger a public charge determination. Similarly, the IRS stimulus rebate is a tax rebate. It is clear that that too is an earned benefit that will not trigger public charge. And then, as Hiwot said, Medicaid, while it might under some circumstances trigger a public charge determination, it will not if people are seeking treatment, testing for COVID-19. So people can seek those kinds of care and treatment and testing with confidence. Now, SNAP, as far as I know, that is going to continue to contribute to a public charge determination. But there are other programs. There are private programs. There are county level programs, state level programs where those determinations will be more complicated. And we really encourage people to see a trustworthy expert, whether that's a county employee or a trusted community-based nonprofit, to go through the facts in each case before you just make a decision on your own. Oh, I'm not going to get these benefits that I need or my family needs to survive. Make sure that the public charge even applies to your case, because it doesn't apply to every case.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, if you are just joining us, we have Fatmata, Hiwot, and Amaha, our immigration experts, just helping us out with questions on how COVID-19 is affecting immigration processes. Any more questions from our viewers? You can send them to on Twitter @Imiserve or on our Facebook page. Looks like we have one question. Are you ATC or ACT? I think ACT is what they meant. Advocating for people with ETINs to get the $1,200 stimulus, since the benefit is a tax rebate. and ETIN holders pay taxes?
Yes, good question. Those are, sort of our two big pieces of advocacy for excluded workers, excluded community members that I mentioned earlier at the federal level are one, the stimulus rebate. We think it was cruel, unnecessary to exclude individual taxpayer ID number holders from the stimulus rebate. The government did not demand that people have a social security number in order to take taxes out of their paycheck. We can't think of a good reason why they should demand it in order to rebate some of that money back to them amidst an economic crisis. The other priority is saying that similarly, unemployment relief ought to be available for people even who don't have immigration status. Some of that might have to happen at the state level. What we'd like to see is the federal government to put funding into states like New York and Virginia and Maryland, and then for those states to step up, as some have already, including California, and saying we are going to provide relief to excluded workers from those workers excluded at the federal level.
And Amaha, I know it varies by state, but in the meantime, are there any resources available to people who cannot access some of these benefits? Are there any organizations that people can go to or look up online?
There are. And it does, as you say, vary by state, sometimes even by city. There are specific local funds. Some of those are private charitable funds. Some of them are public funds. Some of them are public-private partnerships. So, for example, New York City recently announced that in a partnership with the Open Society Foundation, they are going to be distributing $20 million to community members. Most likely, many of those will be undocumented community members who did not qualify for federal relief. We've seen, as I mentioned, California. To my knowledge, in the DC metro area, DC, Maryland, Virginia, mostly we've only seen community-based foundations that are providing private funding. A lot of this can be found, county websites. They're collecting resources, even if they're not directly providing those resources themselves. But it really is down to the local level of figuring out what resources are available.
Okay. And here's another question. What current legislative issues are ongoing or upcoming that people should know about, and what can they do?
I'll take that again, and then I'll pass the baton if anyone else wants to respond. I mean, I do think that unfortunately the COVID health pandemic and the COVID-induced economic crisis have pushed almost everything else off the federal legislative agenda. It's going to be difficult to get anything done for certainly the next couple of months and into potentially through much of into the fall, because first of all, Congress is not even meeting physically in session. One of the biggest obstacles to passing the bill that passed this week was a question of whether they would be required to vote in person. Some members of Congress are physically unable to do that, and so there was some sense that stimulus package number 4 that was just passed might be the last bill that we see for a while. But I think that we will certainly see more rounds of stimulus packages. We are going to fight to include some of these issues we were just talking about, like ITIN and relief for excluded workers, perhaps in the form of block grants to states in future legislative rounds. In terms of how people can support, we encourage them to get in touch with us. Africa Today, I saw, shared some of that contact information on the page, and streamed some of that information. We can connect people either to local efforts or, we have been organizing national update calls where we share federal legislative updates, and people are welcome to join those.
All right. Thank you so much. This has been so informative, and I'm sure a lot of people have benefited. So I'll just give each of our panelists, starting with Fatmata, and I'll allow you to give brief remarks and share any final thoughts, any final remarks, and including letting us know about ongoing legislation that we need to know about, and how people can get in touch with you if they need immigration advice.
Okay. So thank you for having me. This has been a great honor, and I'm really glad that Immigrant Community Services and Africa Today is doing these type of sessions and discussions. It's really needed in the community. And I'm very happy that we're taking the initiative to do that for ourselves, because only we can speak for us, and only we can put forth our issues in the most in a way that mostly fit us, right? So only you can speak for yourself. So I want people to realize that the immigration fight does not end when you get your green card. The immigration fight does not end when you get your citizenship. It continues because there are many coming in after you. And we have to look beyond the superficial of what we see here in the US. Like I said earlier, there are issues that we are not looking at. There are people trying to come into the US from the continent who are not going through the regular way that we think that everyone comes in, and we have to be cognizant of that fact. And we also have to be cognizant of the fact that, as Hua said, even as an undocumented immigrant, you have your rights, and your rights are very clear. In this environment we're in, as Hua said, when you are at home and somebody comes knocking on your door, you do not have to open the door. Realize that once you open that door, you've given them permission to come in. That means anyone who is in that house is now susceptible to them, no matter what. So if they do not have an order, if they do not have a judge-signed document saying, Mr. Smith, do not open the door. Call an attorney if you have one. Try to make sure things are in place to ensure that your kids are always taken care of. In other words, just in case if anything happens, they know who to go to, or whoever it is that you have knows what to do with your children. And you can apply for your benefits whenever you want. You can contact me. My law firm is the Barry Law Center, and I'm out here in Silver Spring, by close to White Oak. So its website is www.barrylawcenter.com. It's very simple and very basic, and you can go on there and check it out. But always speak to an attorney, even if it's just consulting. You don't have to hire one if you don't want to, but speak to an attorney. I've gotten too many people who have come to me with things that they've tried to do and it's backfired, and to fix it costs even more than when you're doing it from beginning. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much for having me, and it's been such an honor to be with my friends here, the hardworking grassroots advocates who are doing fantastic things in legislation and making sure that the African immigrants also have a voice and are being protected.
Thank you so much, Fatmata. It's been a pleasure having you. Hewitt, any last remarks?
I don't have much. I just want to echo what Fatmata has said, making sure that you have the right information and knowing your right. And that's what we do within our communities. We go through the churches and African serving institutions to let them know about their knowing your rights. I think information from the right resource and the correct information is important, especially during that time. My heart was breaking when clients call me and ask me, "Oh, I haven't applied for unemployment because it impacts immigration," and that's because they heard it from their friends. So it's impacting 3-4 people, and it's your livelihood. And this time, you don't need additional burden or hardship in addition to the world stopping. And also, our organization, we're still assisting clients remotely. In the DC area. We're specifically taking DC resident clients. I think you shared our contact information, but our number is 202-816-0416. and just give us a call, and we'll hopefully be able to assist you. And at a minimum, we'll provide a phone consultation. And our work is all pro bono, meaning it's free. And thank you again. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you. It was very informative. I really learned a lot. And Amaha, any last closing remarks?
Again, it was a pleasure, and thank you to Africa Today and to Immigrant Community Services, and to it was an honor to be with a group of women leaders, African women leaders, as part of this panel. I would say, I know this is a scary time for a lot of us, right? It's everything feels unsettled, insecure. We as Africans were extremely resilient. We've experienced crises before, and we know that that we can survive them, and we do survive them. With ourselves, our family, our faith, and so we will survive this crisis as well. I think it's extremely important, as Hewitt said, to inform ourselves of our rights, to get good information. I think it's extremely important, as Fatmata said, to see a reputable attorney if you have legal questions. A competent, knowledgeable attorney like Fatmata or like Hewitt or another either private or not-for-profit attorney who will steer you in the right direction. Lastly, I think it's very important for us to make our voices heard. And there, especially in this year 2020, there are some ways that we can do that. If you are one of the African community members who's been a permanent resident for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you've been holding back on becoming a citizen, what are you waiting for? We're seeing too many. Even a permanent resident, a green card is not a guarantee forever. People can lose and do lose their permanent residency, whereas citizenship is a guarantee, and it's a way that you have a voice and a vote in this country that you now, and many cases your children call home. And so we really need to become citizens, register to vote. Vote for candidates who represent the interests of our community. Ask the candidates questions about the interests of our community. And finally, whether we're a citizen or a permanent resident or temporarily documented or completely undocumented, we can still be counted through the U.S. Census. And it's very important that we do. 2020 is a census year. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with Africans where they've said, well, the census says there's only 150,000 Africans in the DC metro area, or 250,000 in the DC metro area, or 150,000 in New York. I know, it must be twice that. Well, the reason we're undercounted is because we're undercounted, because we don't stand up and make ourselves known. There is no citizenship question on the census this year. The census is legally prohibited from sharing your information with other government agencies, and it is going to be how political representation, funding, and other key decisions are going to be made. And so the next time that an administration is looking to do something like an African ban or target the diversity visa, maybe they'll think twice if they see that we are powerful in our numbers and growing. And so I think that's something that we can all do this year.
Thank you so much, Hewitt, for those words of encouragement. And I would like to also thank Fatmata and Hewitt for coming on the show. I hope we have more conversations like this where we inform each other and just ease our concerns and some of the issues that we deal with without having anyone to ask. And to learn more about the work of the Barry Law Firm, African Communities Together, please visit the Immigrant Community Services Facebook page or imiserve.org. And we're always thankful to Afrique Today, whose vision is to provide access to new globally trending information which affects African culture, politics, society in a revolutionary manner with integrity to change and positively impact our world. From all of us here at Immigrant Community, from our home to yours, have a good night, be well, and stay healthy.